Hey everyone, and welcome. Today, we're going to be talking about something that is so fundamental to our lives, our relationship with food and sleep. We're going to get into the clinical side of eating, feeding, and sleep disorders, for sure. But what's even more important is that we're going to look past the symptoms and try to find the real, human experience that's at the heart of it all.
And I want to give a huge welcome to Professor Sedgi's abnormal psychology students over at Los Angeles City College. Listen, you have been working so hard, and you are officially here at Module 7. Seriously, that is no small thing. So just take a second and give yourself credit for that, okay? Now, we're going to build on all that amazing work and jump into a topic that is just so relevant to every single one of us. So as we go through this module, I want you to keep this one big question in the back of your mind. How do we take all this clinical knowledge, all these terms and facts, and turn it into real, genuine human empathy? You know, it's one thing to memorize a list of criteria, but the real mission here, the whole point, is to understand the person behind the diagnosis. This isn't just about pathology, it's about people. All right, let's start with the realities of eating. A lot of times, these disorders show up as things we can see on the outside, certain behaviors or physical changes, but it's so important to remember that they are always rooted in a really deep, profound inner struggle. This slide does a really great job of breaking down the two eating disorders most people have heard of. So for anorexia nervosa, the key word to remember is restriction. It's all driven by this intense, overwhelming fear of gaining weight, which leads to a distorted view of one's own body and a dangerously low body weight. But then you have bulimia nervosa, which is all about a cycle. It's this vicious loop of binge eating followed by behaviors to try and compensate for it, like purging. It's an incredibly painful cycle, often wrapped up in so much shame and anxiety. And that brings us to something that often gets confused. What's the difference between bulimia and binge eating disorder? Well, the slide here makes the critical distinction really clear. Binge eating disorder has those same episodes of binge eating, but, and this is everything, it happens without the compensatory behaviors like purging that are the hallmark of bulimia. And that one difference is absolutely vital for diagnosis and changes the entire picture, both physically and psychologically. But our relationship with food can be complicated in a lot of other ways too. This module introduces us to other feeding disorders. There's pica, which is a compulsion to eat things that aren't food. Then there's ARFID, where a person avoids food, but it's not because of body image, it's because of sensory issues or maybe a deep fear of choking. And there's also rumination disorder, which involves repeatedly regurgitating food. It just goes to show you what a wide spectrum of challenges people can face. Okay, let's switch gears now. We've talked about the fuel we use when we're awake. Now let's talk about how we restore ourselves at night. Sleep is one of the most basic human needs. But for millions of people, rest is a battle. It just doesn't come easy. So to really get what goes wrong with sleep, we first have to understand how it's supposed to work. Our nights are built around this really elegant cycle. First, you drift off in stage 1, then you get into this deep relaxation in stage 2. Stage 3 is the really good stuff, the deepest, most physically healing sleep, where your brain is putting out these slow delta waves. And finally, you hit REM sleep. That's when your brain gets super active, and that's when you dream. Sleep disorders are basically what happens when this beautiful process gets all thrown out of whack. And the number one disruptor? Insomnia. Look, we've all had a rough night where we just can't fall asleep. But for it to be a disorder, that difficulty has to be persistent. We're talking at least 3 nights a week for at least 3 months, and it has to be causing real distress in your life. It's that horrible feeling when your bed stops being a place of rest and starts becoming a place of anxiety. And it's not just insomnia. There are other major sleep disorders to be aware of. You have narcolepsy, which involves these uncontrollable sleep attacks right in the middle of the day. Then there's sleep apnea, where a person's breathing literally stops and starts all night long, yanking them out of deep sleep over and over. And parasomnias, that's a whole category of just unwanted activity, like sleepwalking or night terrors that happen while someone is totally asleep. Okay, so we've talked a lot about the what, the symptoms, the different diagnoses. Now let's get to the really interesting part, the why. Why do these things happen? We're going to explore this by looking through 3 completely different lenses. First up is the sociocultural lens. The simple truth is, we don't live in a bubble. The world we're in, our culture, our family, our city, it has a profound impact on our minds and our bodies. And this is especially true for those of you living in a place as intense and amazing as Los Angeles. Just think about your life here in LA for a second. You're juggling classes at LAC, maybe you've got a job, you're trying to make rent, and all the while you're just bombarded by media pushing these perfect, often totally fake body types. There's this relentless pressure to hustle, to build that career, to make it. All that external pressure can easily fuel the kind of always-on anxiety that leads to insomnia, and it can also feed the body dissatisfaction that's right at the core of so many eating disorders. All right, so from the outside world, let's turn the focus inward. The next lens is cognitive and behavioral. This one looks at how our own internal world, our thoughts, our habits, can actually trap us in these really powerful, vicious cycles. And you can probably imagine how this works, right? A thought like, I have to be thin for anyone to like me, can easily drive restrictive eating. Or a belief like, if I don't fall asleep right now, tomorrow is ruined. Well, that creates the exact kind of stress that makes sleep impossible. These thought patterns and the habits they create build these loops that can feel absolutely unbreakable when you're stuck inside them. And finally, we've got the biological lens. This is a super important reminder that we're not just a product of our environment or our thoughts. Our brains and our bodies come with a kind of blueprint. Our genetics and our basic biology play a huge, fundamental role in all of this. This chart really helps us see all the pieces of that biological puzzle. Someone might have a genetic predisposition that just makes them more vulnerable to begin with. Then you've got the hypothalamus in the brain. Think of it as the command center for hunger and sleep. Neurotransmitters like serotonin are critical for mood and appetite. Hormones like leptin are supposed to be the, hey, you're full signal. If any single piece of this incredibly complex system is out of balance, it can throw everything off. So, with this really complex web of causes, sociocultural, cognitive, biological, where's the hope? Well, that brings us to our last section, the pathways to healing. And this isn't about some magic bullet or a quick fix. It's about a journey of collaboration, and most importantly, recovery. The best news is there is an entire toolbox for recovery. And notice how these treatments link right back to the causes we just talked about. Cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT, goes right after those tricky thought loops. Family-based therapy acknowledges that whole sociocultural piece. And medical approaches, everything from SSRIs that help with underlying depression to a CPAP machine for sleep apnea, they address the biological components. It just shows you there is no one-size-fits-all answer. And through all the different theories and therapies and treatments, we can never, ever lose sight of the goal. It is always about one person, one life, helping one single individual get their health back, find their peace, and reclaim their well-being. And that really brings us right back to where we started. As you finish up this module, I really want you to carry this idea with you. This stuff, it is so much more than a list of symptoms in a textbook. It's about understanding the real people in our communities, in our families, and sometimes even in ourselves. So I'm just going to leave you with this last thought to chew on. Whether you go on to become a clinician or just in your life as a friend or a partner or a family member, how are you going to use this knowledge? How will you make sure you're listening past the surface to hear the real human story that's hiding behind the symptoms? Because that is where empathy truly begins. Thank you so much for diving into this with me. Keep up the amazing work you're doing in this course.